if possible, cry about it. And the big question I kept asking every lady was, can you actually handle an expressive man? Like, can you really handle a man who really tells you everything in his mind? Because
Hey, in this particular session, Paul and I we talk on the concept of men being emotional. Now, that is an interesting topic because you have different viewpoints. Now, Paul and I have similar views on this topic. Some areas might not be the same, but in the general sense, we have the same point of view. And in this session, I am going to discuss my points, and Paul is going to make some nice points. So, should men be emotional or not? Actually, it's not a yes or no answer, but more about understanding the situation and context. It has been a while. Thank God. I think this is the first this year.
have we started?
Yes.
Let me know when we start now. Let's just,
So actually, what I want to discuss about is a very simple topic, and that is um, men should be more emotional. Men should. But the funny thing is that anytime it's talked about, there's always one emotion focused on, and that is men should cry. They should feel okay to cry. And I'm like, there are many emotions. Like, why do we always forget happiness is an emotion? All right, hold up. In this section, I'm trying to explain that men do cry, right? And then for some reason, it's always ignored. For example, if you are a diehard football fan, you most likely would have seen men cry over and over again on the pitch. And how come you never see another man tell them, hey, you're a man, why are you crying? And so I was trying to explain that to an extent, there seems to be a time and a place where we understand that, okay, yeah, something sad is happening. Or, for example, in a war front where someone just lost his mate to a gunshot and the soldier is crying, you know, mm, you wouldn't see another soldier come and say, hey, why are you crying? You're a man. You just lost someone. So that's what I'm trying to explain here. And some days back, I saw a video on WhatsApp status. So it showed, it was a tweet. Not that I agree with the tweet, but the video behind it was funny. So a guy posted that no woman can make him as happy as how football gives him joy. So one lady came on there and said, like, you guys are crazy. Oh. So he posted a video of, I think, Ronaldo. There was a penalty. I think that was the game changer, and he scored. And then people were shouting, guys crying. So the question I wanted to ask is, when those men were crying, did any guy come and say, you guys are men, don't cry? So this is my opinion on this topic. I have different opinions. One is, there are times men cry, and for some reason, is accepted within men. We feel this is a good time. And I feel that it's for certain reasons. We cannot ignore the fact of leadership and when people draw strength from leadership. Now, if you're Nigerian, I think there was a recent video of which state governor was that was almost looking helpless to Boko Haram. Do you know how that would have affected the citizens? That is, it's not we're not expecting him to hold AK-47, but the fact that a leader will come out and say, let's say, please pray for us. Now, of course, prayer is good, but imagine the effect if Buhari came out and said, look, oh, just start shedding tears that we are trying to deal with these Boko Haram people. Like, we are trying our best. Imagine the message. So, what do you think about this when it comes to? Because anytime I hear it, Like that time we had, by the way, we'll talk about this book. The last time we had a show, you were about to release the book. Yes. So during the launch, we talked about this, but then I kept hearing about men crying. I was like, is that the only emotion? So let me hear your own view.
And a lot of times when ladies talk about men expressing emotion, like you rightly said, they're talking about a man crying. But like you said as well, I think I'll be quoting a lot of things you're saying. Singular, because I feel like that we. When writing the book, I kept asking ladies, "What is the one thing you wish you understood about men?" And they said they wanted men to be more expressive, more um, able to express themselves. And what they meant by that, like you said, was you should be able to express emotions, talk about how you feel, if possible, cry about it. And the big question I kept asking every lady was, can you actually handle an expressive man? Like, can you really handle a man who really tells you everything in his mind? Because a lot of times, most ladies actually don't understand that a man is not another woman in skirts, in trousers. you know they assume that and most times ladies what they know about men they've learned from fellow women, right? So already they have a presupposition of how men should be, how men should act. So a lot of times you want a man to be strong but also be feeble at the same time. You want a man to be, so we have these different you know we're almost confused about what we want from men, basically. And so the idea of emotional expression, of course, there's a difference between being a man and being a leader, right? A man is first of all a man before he's several other roles. Like for instance, a father is not the same thing as a son. A father is not the same thing as a friend, right? So different roles actually, in a way, depict certain level of attitudes that people should have. Now, does it mean they should not be themselves? They should be themselves.
Leadership. So now the concept the concept of roles is important. So on one point you have a man as who he is, and another point you have his position. Now the man doesn't need to be the president of a country to be a leader. He's a leader in different areas of his life. Now what we're trying to explain here is that role affects how you behave. For example, we can't deny the impact of a leader's strengths and how it passes on to its people. So, if you're a Nigerian, there was a recent tweet by President Buhari, and so there were some kidnapped students, and he came out and was appealing to the kidnappers or whoever that they should release the students. And if you looked at the response by citizens, that statement wasn't the most encouraging, because if you, as the leader, are beginning to beg the opposition, then it's almost like the whole party is finished. So you can apply that to, like, let's be honest, you can apply that to other areas of life. If the leader of an army, a battalion, begins to break down emotionally, not to say that our president is breaking down emotionally, but if the leader breaks down in front of his followers, it doesn't send the most powerful message. So sometimes the leader has to be strong for the followers, even though all of them are having the same emotion. But because of your position, you can't act the way you like.
Like I mentioned about different roles determining certain attitudes that people would have. Like for instance, if a father, like I give you an example about a leader. Now, there is an expectation that people have of leaders. Basically, they expect that you should at least have some level of control over chaotic situations, right? Now, when a leader now begins to act helpless, um, definitely you expect the people under him to feel defenseless, to feel like they are in trouble, like they are in trouble. So it's one thing when a pilot in a plane say, "Oh, we don't have anything to do." In fact, I don't know what to do. I don't know.
We
When
don't
when a
die.
pilot says that, you just know your life is over, right? But when he now comes and says, "Oh, we're in a very difficult situation right now. It's chaotic, but we will survive."
Yes.
There's some level of energy it gives to you, right? It makes you want, at least hopeful, that you will be able to. So those level of role doesn't mean that the leader cannot, but sometimes he has to ask himself, can they handle this level of emotion, right?
Yes.
So that's actually him thinking beyond himself.
As a leader, you're thinking about other people. And people are going to have different opinions on this approach. But generally, I think that sometimes, you know, as a man, you might decide to hold off some information. Let me give you an example. After Jesus' resurrection, there was a time he was with the disciples, and he said he said they weren't fit enough to handle that information. They weren't ready to handle the information. So he knew their capacity, and these are his disciples that he has been communicating with in for majority of his ministry. He knew their capacity. So the same, if you can get this angle, sometimes to protect the person, you might not share some information. Now, like I always say, this is different from you going through something and you don't want to, communicate or, you know, share information with your wife. It's not, you have to balance it. And I feel even if you don't want or you feel the person can handle the information now, if you can prepare the person to handle it. Maybe give it to the person in small drips. You kind of prepare the person, try and slowly um, groom the person to assimilate that information.
I believe is important for, like, a lot of issues. What men have is, they don't. A lot of time we don't see the woman that we marry as, or the woman that we are with, as someone we can communicate with in a level that they can really understand exactly
What's going
what's
on?
going on.
Yeah.
Because sometimes we can't really trust the women, and when we say trust, I don't necessarily mean that she's going to betray you. I simply mean sometimes you are not sure how she will react to it. A lot of
Yes.
times, because you already, naturally as a man, you feel you feel you are naturally built to solve
It's
problems.
under
You
control.
to put things in control. So now, going through an issue where you feel like you can't actually meet that problem, it's already enough trauma for you to feel like you can't put it under control. It's actually slipping out of your hand. But now, to now feel like telling somebody else that you actually cannot have it under control is actually a big deal for a lot of men. And so most times, most times a man wants to be sure, and a lot of time when men talk about these things to women in their lives, the women become very emotional and overly emotional. Then he now feels bad. He feels worse that now he has made you feel bad.
Back to what I was saying, communication with your wife is very important. So even if we said in the past that these are the reasons why the man may not want to share information, it is very crucial. So I don't see why you should hide anything, right? I think okay, maybe you say for some while she can handle that information. I think after you it's the load is on your head actually to prepare her for it and eventually tell her. And some cases why this is dicey is some men, they won't tell the wives. They will go and now discuss it with someone in the office. So if you think someone outside can listen to you, why don't you tell your wife first? Or only.
Men should not say, because I'm a man, this is how men are. That's one thing that I believe has been a problem for even both gender, male and female. This is how we are. I'm a big preacher of the idea of understanding the gender disparity, the difference that there's actually difference between men and women. No matter how we want to sugarcoat it, and then of course we're different. Someone was asking someone, are trans women actually women? Trans women are trans women. They are not women. What makes us different is that we have some features in us that are different. So the point is, um, um, what was I?
I go edit it.
Getting tired. I say it's very, very important for men to communicate. Like it's so important. We may not be able to communicate like women do, but it's important that we actually communicate because a lot of times when men keep things to themselves in the bid to want to handle a lot of cases, we we sink into tremendous level of emotional experiences internally that begin to affect other ways that we do things. And you have to understand this. Understand these guys. Women need us to communicate with them. Why? Because they feed off our conversations. That's what feeds them, right? So you can't say because you are a man, you must actually be yourself. And like you're not trying to be a woman, but you're also actually just coming to a point, a neutral point. Like you're trying to actually come to a point where you actually can come, like a place of understanding where there's an exchange, right? So and we need the conversation. We need so even if and I don't know how maybe I can be careful to say this, Sha, but I feel like you just need someone you can communicate with, maybe a fellow man or something. But you shouldn't. It's already a tough world out there to try to go through it by yourself, and then not just keeping it to. Like I found out that in my book, most of the suicidal cases were caused by men who just keep to themselves. Most of the shooting that happens in the U.S. are actually by young boys who are suffering from depression. They keep things to themselves, and over time they are so quiet and
It builds up.
and the builds up is like a heap. It just keeps
Some comes
building up.
into they can go crazy.
Exactly, they go crazy and they begin to now, they start becoming aggressive and doing stuff here. And it will shock you what some gentlemen would do. Like, it just shock you. These are simply things that are being, as a result of constantly, hoarding things constantly and it piles up. So it's important that once in a while that we're able to, just detoxify our minds by simply dealing with those things. Talk with someone.
As like for a married man, your wife should be someone you can talk to. And I think the reasons why some people complain is that the men nowadays they will leave the wives, go and communicate to someone in the office.
Yeah.
The office wife knows more than the one at home. So they're like, what's the problem? And then for the men, slowly, as you're communicating with someone else, it's not just communication. You start sharing your life with the person. Before you know it, you say, how did we get
close.
here?
Exactly.
What happened?
So the issue of trust, like I mentioned earlier, most times men don't trust their women, mainly because sometimes, beyond the emotional expression, some women, when they're having issues, a conflict with the man, that's when they go back and dig out some of the things he has said. And some ladies don't know how to keep things to themselves. They talk to their best friend about what a man is going through. And there's nothing worse than when a man is already bad enough that he told you. Now getting to have someone else, knowing about it is actually one of the worst forms of betrayal for a man. And sometimes when men see this happen the first time, we just lock up. Like, we won't tell you nothing.
That will be the end.
That's the end. So it's important that women should help their men by be trustworthy, And I mentioned things that ladies can do when a man's having a cave experience in my book.
Yeah, his book. Quality both outside and inside. We expect more from him, and then you should go and read it. So that will be that for now, and we will be more.
Unscripted.
We'll be more consistent with our videos and controversial issues, right? So right later.
Peace.
The men need to communicate with their wives, with their families, and say, okay, this is what I'm going through. It's your wife is basically you, right? It's not a contract. It's not a business contract. We treat marriage as a business contract. Your wife is you, one flesh. So like anything you're going through, she's going through. Anything she's going through, you are going through. So I think you should share the burdens. And I know that there are sometimes you feel maybe some things are too much for the other person to handle. still you find a way to sort that out.